Hey, just a heads up. Full spoiler warning for everything leading for the live action One Piece adaptation, as well as minor manga spoilers for the events leading up to Arlong Park.
It's the name of the treasure in the grand line. Gaio, One Piece.
Holiday
Friend
festivities.
obligations,
Yeah.
late ferries, like just everything going towards the rest of it, and like not having enough
hmm
opportunity to go through since it's like right in the middle of a new anime season. So it's
hmm
just at the very least I did get everything done that I wanted to for summer, which is
hmm
fine. But now it's like Freyren's already out. Its
Oh
fifth
yeah, fragrance
episode
out.
just came out on Friday, and so
Right.
it's just at the very least like my Fridays are pretty packed in the sense that I've got
Stuff to
Freyren, and
consume.
then there's a fire truck show, and then there's Shorzy, of course, the greatest anime of all time. Yeah, for sure. But it is interesting though because I'm trying to remember if I think when the first season of Shorzy came out, they did a really weird episode chunk release where they did 3 episodes of it in the first week and then 3 episodes in the second week to just
Mm.
get through and like try to get people invested. Kind of like the same thing that they did with Arcane
Oh,
compared to
like
the
just
rest of
an
it.
like a small binge, micro binge, right? Just giving people content to like work with and like see whether or not they want to invest into it.
Because that's what I did like about Arcane, and that's honestly something that I feel like Netflix should do more often, considering
Like
that
batch
Netflix,
release.
yeah, because it's just yes, we understand whatever algorithm or whatever readings that you get on for Netflix says that oh yeah no, the batch release is better than just doing it a weekly, kind of like an anime thing where
hmm
it's just kind of like no, we can't do it like on a weekly basis. We have to get everything out all at once. All has to be ready, and then we can go and release it. Which I
hmm
can understand for production reasons to that point. So at the very least, it's like okay, we're not going to put out the show until everything is finished,
hmm
which I can understand. But like for bigger productions on that line, like say Breaking Bad, like say Game of Thrones, like that was never necessarily an issue.
Like long running series where the production's always ongoing.
Yeah, and at least in that case, it just seemed like everything was already done, but they still kept to that weekly format because it keeps the conversation going. Like it's
hmm
always a like gathering around the water cooler moment where it's like, holy shit, did you see last night's episode of Breaking Bad, or last night's episode of Game of Thrones, or House of the Dragon, or The Bear? All of these different pieces that have that opportunity to push it down on a weekly schedule and keep people talking about it for months and months instead of just going through and it's like, sure, it's all there. I mean, anime wise, it's that's one of the reasons why nobody cared about part six or part
hmm
five.
Right.
Like, just feel bad for JoJo fans
Yeah,
considering that,
the hype train was going for a good little while, and then it just stopped. And it's just like, wow, JoJo Fridays ended,
and you just don't know when it's going to come back.
right?
And, like, I think they did at least do that for part six, where they did cut it into either thirds or halves because they did end up getting like 13 episode chunks, but
hmm
then they just didn't tell anybody. Like, this
hmm
was not something that anybody's going to be looking forward to. No, like, we'll just throw it out 13 episodes there, and then 13 episodes a month from now, and then like 13 episodes whenever we want, like, to put it out, like, whenever it's like finished towards the rest. And so it's like nobody talked about it, barely anybody. I still
Yeah.
enjoyed it, but
hmm
yeah, I feel bad for part six.
Yeah.
And I mean, like although it is interesting to kind of see that go because at least One Piece did find success with that batch
hmm
release, where it's just
hmm
like, oh yeah, no, regardless, all of this stuff is out. Like, go watch it, even though it is a lot of content. Like, it
hmm
is not necessarily 8 hours worth, but it's close to like 6.5, 7 hours of content, and they just plopped it all down there.
Yeah.
But at the very least, it's at least nice to get back in together and finish off the rest of it because we did have a lot to talk about, like just the first episode alone, since that was
hmm
the introductory and that was something that everybody was getting into and everybody was excited for to kind of like see how One Piece was able to go through. And even a
hmm
month later, it's you still have people like not necessarily at its height, but still glimpses of people like trying to give it a shot, trying to kind of see what is quote unquote the best live action like anime
To date.
TV series to
Yeah.
date. Yeah.
To date. No, it's like it's good. I'm like it just condenses a really long, now at this point classical anime arc into something that's digestible for a new audience. And I think that's the merit of just like having a different adaptation. Is just like brings fresh perspective to the series. And I'm not expecting it to be like a one for one adaptation. Like I expect them to make some like creative liberty, take some creative liberties, and tailor it to this new audience. But I don't know. I feel like it changes enough that I'm left wanting. So I don't know. So like picking up from like episode 1 where we get like the introduction to Luffy, Kobe, and Alvida, and like some of the world of One Piece. Like moving on to episode 2 and 3, we have, let's see,
Mostly at Buggy's pirates
Buggy
and
Pirate.
his
Yeah.
crew that we end up going through and getting to check in with, because I was really curious to see how they would do Buggy towards the rest of it. And at the very least, with the introduction of him at the end of episode 1, it
Hmm.
was more like, okay, he is going to be as chaotic as he was towards the rest of it. Since I have seen clips of him online, like through the animated series as well, but it wasn't
Hmm.
necessarily something that I had any or as much of a attachment to towards the rest of it. So this was going to be, even though I knew that Buggy was crazy in a sense, I didn't necessarily how they would translate that craziness. Would
Hmm.
it be something more of like a thriller slasher villain, or was it going to be somebody that was more like comedical inside of his like craziness?
In anime, they push him more towards like a comedic, like gag character, as a clown, and like just like how braggadocious, Buggy is. It makes sense. I think like they hit a good balance between like making in live action at least they made Buggy more threatening or appear more menacing, as he's willing to do like the atrocities to the town. But I think like it also undercuts his comedic side where like I'm just maybe not as like more cowardly, more like neurotic, and I like that they captured some of that. I imagine like Buggy to be very lippy. He likes to sass his antagonists or his adversaries, and yeah, I think they had a nice balance. Like he has lots of quips, he has a lot of things to say. His whole bit about like his nose, it was like, okay, all right, okay, I can see like this version of Buggy existing within the anime, and like it
What
sells
did
it
you
to
just
me.
say about me?
What you
It's
just
like
nose? So that's great. Love that part. The
because he is witty and quippy, and the way that he's able to, because he's a little not necessarily comedic or tragic, but he's more like pitiable in that sense, because
yes.
that he's incredibly threatening towards that case, but that there are just you feel like there are so many more bigger
Hmm.
fish in the sea. Like he's
They're
not
big. Yeah.
he's lashing out at everything else to try and compensate for something that he's
He's lacking.
lacking, but at the
Right.
very least towards the rest of it, he's able to juggle this see this
Juggle.
this yeah, just juggle this like sense of menace but also wit and banter towards the rest, which
Hmm.
still like makes him an incredibly entertaining
Hmm.
antagonist towards the rest of it, to give us like a more threatening character inside this world of pirates, that
Hmm.
not every pirate is like Luffy where they're
Hmm.
happy-go-lucky and they like want to go see the world, but
Hmm.
pirates that just do pirate things like
Yeah.
loot and pillage and plunder.
Yes. So like I think like a lot of the crux of around Buggy's character is that so in the anime it shows Buggy's association and backstory to Shanks, where they both served on Gold Roger's ship as like small little like chore boys. So like that's where they get the association to each other. Like the anime fleshes out like Shanks' backstory, Buggy's backstory, and also like adding to the myth and legend of Gold Roger. Whereas like in the live action, we only really get to hear it in like passing. Like
And it's more just his relationship with Shanks rather than is to literally anybody else.
yeah, I think a lot of it, like a lot of like how Buggy presents himself hinges on like his insecurity of like being like a big enough pirate, to live up to the name of the king of pirates, and like also like Shanks is like doing really well, pretty well for himself and is respectable, but like Buggy's all like, whatever, who cares about that guy? I'm better. He's speaking loudly for his to compensate for his incompetence a lot of the times. And I think that's part of like the comedy that you get from Buggy, which I enjoy. It's also like the arc where like Nami gets properly introduced as like a potential crewmate for Luffy. So yeah, I think that part of the arc was okay. It's more so the scene where Buggy plays with sorry, the scene where Nami tosses up Luffy's straw hat, thus pointing him out to Buggy's crowd, was actually Buggy was the one who took a look at that hat and was like, "What is this?" So they switched those character moments, and it's just like trying to like establish like get Nami roped into the crew a little bit earlier which I don't know. It changes the context a little bit. Not that huge. It's also like the arc where we also get the Kobe Meppo, Kobe Garp Helmeppo B story.
Trio,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So I think that it was smart for them to introduce that plot line as a means to give more things to follow on screen instead of like just being stuck in Buggy's tent. Because I think like I don't know, it would have been hard to sell just on its
because they
own.
have to essentially push this main trio as kind of like not the B plot, but more like the B team,
Right.
where you do get Luffy's evolving and expanding crew, but then the majority of the set and the characters that are going to be following them constantly, at least towards the rest of it, definitely
Hmm.
seems like it's going to be
Hmm.
Kobe Helmeppo and Garp, because
Yeah.
there are really no other Marines that we almost get to by name
Yeah.
besides like Nezubi, who we'll like get to like later on to the rest of it, but it's
Yeah.
mostly for the perspective of the Marines. It's kind
Right.
of just those three.
Yeah. So I think it was an okay choice for them to like include them as like a backstory to and show like a little bit more of the world through their lens. And just because the Marines have more access to different things, it helps to establish the larger world instead of just like through Luffy's eyes and the Straw Hat's eyes in this case. I think like in anime, the Kobe Meppo plot was only like told through a cover like a volume cover spread across like 30 chapters or 30 volumes actually, I should say. So you only get to see like that character development across like the 30 volumes, and it was like such a small thing too. But the anime was able to like elevate it by like a ton. I think the debut episode is like somewhere like episode 68 or 69 when they finally do like an anime adaptation to those cover pages, and like it's a fantastic what they can do to like add in micro narrative into those characters to make us really feel and be attached to them, like and the progression. You get to see like in manga and anime, you get to see like Kobe and Helmeppo like bond with each other and like stating what their dreams are and like them learning about the perspectives of each other and like how they can use it in their world and like they both encourage each other to grow, which is nice because like this is Helmeppo was literally like Kobe's first adversary, which is like just pointing a gun at his head and like Kobe's all like, "No, shoot me, Luffy! Don't stop!" It's I don't know. It's just good to see the contrast of like, yo, this dude who pointed a gun at me is now like my friend, somebody I consider a friend, and it's like, oh wow. So I think it's great.
It's really tough for me considering that like a lot of the stuff whenever my mind goes back to any of the clips that I've seen from the anime, most of it comes from the Nun Piece abridged series. So it's just kind of like so it's a phenomenal point towards the fact that Helmeppo is literally holding Kobe at gunpoint, and then it's like, oh yeah, no, you're going to be one of my longest like running friends
Yeah,
for
because
the rest of
it's
the
also
series.
yeah,
And then
it's like
it's just
fun.
everything inside of the rest, everything inside of Nun Piece is essentially just going through. It's like stop moving, or the boy gets a bullet to the head. And it's like, stop it, I'll kill the boy, I swear. It's like, what is going on here?
Yeah, and it's also like fun because like there's a point where like Garp and so like Helmeppo gets captured by Axan Morgan, who's trying to escape Garp's fleet, and they're about to like sink the ship. But like Kobe's like, no, my friend's on that ship, and stands in front of the cannon in order to stop them from shooting down Helmeppo. And it's like, wow, that's like it's like everything comes back full circle where like Kobe's now defending against Helmeppo getting a gun pointed at him, you know, like that sort of thing. And through that like interaction, Garp sees the resolve that those two have and takes them in as his pupils. And it's like it's yeah, it's just good. It the anime also like adds in a small little narrative of like Helmeppo and his association to his father, where Helmeppo proclaims that like he's gonna be an even greater marine than his father, or greater man than his father. And like it shows in like a small scene, small like afterthought where uh Axan Morgan like looks back after releasing Helmeppo and thinking about like what will become of my son. And it's like it's nice that they like leave it open to interpretation, like that all characters like have like something more to them.
But the relationships are incredibly cut and dry towards most of the points, but then you will
Mhm.
see that over the course of like a long period of time, because that is what Oda is able to accomplish with a story like this vast and this
Mhm.
wide is just and everybody that will like they will start off tropey and incredibly one note, and that's at least a way to introduce you to them because of such a wide cast is in this and so many named characters and so many people that you have to go through
There's
and
only
keep
so much
track of
time.
towards the, there's only so much time. And
Yeah.
so at the very least it's easy for like that simple beginning to be a good jumping off point where it's like, okay, I know this based on like one or two lines, I know exactly like what this character is about. He's a daddy's boy. He's really spoiled. He's going to go towards the rest of it. But then
Hmm.
it gives you so much room for
Hmm.
adaptation and
Hmm.
building towards the rest of them, so that now that they are more than just a basic named character, that they will be able to grow themselves as the series moves forward. And that's how you'll definitely, since the amount of time that we were given with Kobe and Helmeppo, at least in this first season, then odds
Hmm.
are there will still be getting a little bit more of them whenever the
Hmm.
second season comes out.
Yeah. So moving on from episode 2. Okay, so now we enter Sir Village. And this is
Which
Usopp's
is,
arc.
yeah,
So let's take a look at this. So let's take a look at the points that are overrun in Sir Village. So we have the Kuina versus Zoro backstory, and they use that when like Zoro's stuck in a. So like okay, so let's talk about Usopp. Usopp's character. What do you think of him?
let's, oh boy, he's he's not as annoying as I expected him to be, because that was the only thing like leading into One Piece, is that I know that Usopp gets better later. It's
Hmm.
just how much later and how much of him am I going to have to deal with, especially in terms of his introduction,
Hmm.
leading into what is essentially going to be the core of Luffy's crew.
Right.
So how? So at the very least, he does the whole boy cried wolf sort of deal, boy
Hmm.
cried pirates.
Hmm.
I understand why that is definitely a thing, and it is a coping mechanism for him to go through. But the fact that he's been doing that for years and years and years inside of a town that is definitely necessary to be notified when actual pirates are coming.
Yeah.
So, where it's like you kind of see where that story thread is going to go immediately, but really does not endear you to Usopp's character towards the rest of it. At the very
Yeah.
least, you do understand like the same deal. His one note thing is that he's a loudmouth and he's a spinster. He
Hmm.
will fabricate these tales to
Hmm.
go through and at least have the opportunity, like, you know why he does it. You know that he does
Hmm.
do it for Kaya,
Hmm.
but it's still like as a introduction towards, especially with somebody who is completely new and is going to be jumping into this, it's like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, I
Yeah.
understand that we already have like one comic relief in Luffy, but you're telling me that it's mostly just going to be guys around him? I don't know.
I think like the core I think the core Usopp's character is in his motivation of why he wants to lie. It's more like he wants to envision himself as like an image of his father, right? Of like a great pirate who he romanticizes about and thinks about like, he's done all these things and he's gonna come back and things are gonna be good. And it's also just to cope with the loss of like childhood abandonment, and also like being left alone for the most time, because it's just a quiet town and there's not a whole lot of things to do. His mother is also sick. His father basically abandoned them, and he doesn't have much to do. So Usopp romanticize it gets lost in his imagination and romanticizes about those ideas, and I think like that helps. He channels
It's a
it,
way, it helps him cope. Yeah.
yeah, and it helps him channel to have a wondrous imagination, and like he uses that to help Kaya because like he was also in a similar situation where he lost his parents and like Kaya lost her parents, and so he understands that pain, which is why he elaborates on all these grand tales. I think like part of like why Sir Village is a little bit more bland is just because Usopp doesn't have a direct villain to fight against. There's Captain Kuro and Cloudor, which we'll get into a little bit, but that's mostly taken care of by Luffy. Usopp, I think, really needs Django in order to like build himself up. So Django is missing from the live action adaptation. He is just a hypnotist, like a moonwalking, jive, cool, sometimes incompetent hypnotist. But it gives Usopp an antagonist to fight against and like really rise to the occasion. Be like, all right, guys, I'm gonna save Kaya from Django. Even though I'm weak, cowardly, and sometimes incompetent, I have to do everything that I can to compensate for that. So in their fight in the anime, Usopp's using any dirty trick that he can in order to get an upper advantage. Like I think he chooses to fight them, the Black Cat pirates, on a slope that he covered in oil, so that they would have to be like running uphill while he's firing them downhill. So like it's small things like that Usopp excel in. He's a craftsman. He's applying as many strategies as he can. They may not be like well executed, but like he's doing what he can to compensate for him being not as strong as the others. I think that's where he needs. In terms of the rest of the live action adaptation for the episode, This is the point where we get to see Zoro getting captured yet again, and whatchamacallit, he's knocked
Getting
out.
bonked on the head
He's got
and
bonked on the
shut
head,
down well.
and it's like, like the whole running gag is like Zoro's always like trapped. Unlike Buggy's arc, he was just like tied up and didn't have access to his swords. And like, if following episode, guess what? He's tied up or like occupied somewhere else, and still needs to find his swords. So I don't know. They use so in order because Syrup Village is relatively a bland plot line. They included Zoro's backstory, which is his fight with Kuina, and I think a lot of the things, the points were hammered out. Like everything that happened in the anime kind of did happen in live action in terms of like Zoro's backstory, but I think like the delivery was stiff. It's because it's more like it's lacking the emphasis that Zoro sees. Well, okay, so Kuina is like the ideal that Zoro strives for, like his goal, but it doesn't show off the time that Zoro and Kuina are training in order, and like the amount of extensive effort that Zoro goes through in order to get up to Kuina's level. That's missing, which is it makes the end of that small plot line feel a little bit weaker. That's like Zoro is like crying out in frustration because like he can't beat Kuina because she's just that good, and Kuina begrudges her gender because she wished she was born a man in order to be stronger to swordsman or swordswoman, but she feels the limitation of just by being a girl. And Zoro like refutes that by saying like that doesn't mean anything. Like it's because of our effort, not because of our nature that we're able to accomplish these goals, and that
You are
makes
my goal. Yeah, you are my goal. You are my ideal, and you are the one. And one
Mhm,
of us will become the greatest swordsman in
mhm,
that sense, as long as we continue to fight for each other and against
mhm,
each other. But then he doesn't. He loses that. So it's like, where
right.
exactly does he go?
And like in the live action, it's like plainly stated, like the oath is plainly stated that he wants to be a great swordsman for those reasons. But like in anime, you get to see like the build up to it, and it's like, yeah, now I get it. Now I understand like why it means so much to him. Even like Koshiro in like the manga or anime, so Zoro's teacher, is a little bit more jovial, and he often gives Zoro like thoughts about observations of life, like what was it? Humans are fragile things, Zoro. When he's speaking about Kuina's death, it's like the reverence of like uh I don't know, just the reverence of life, and like teaching Zoro like these other small small moments that I felt were missing.
Yeah, that was missing in terms of him being thrown down a well and trying to emulate The Dark Knight Rises. And it's just, if there's anything that you don't want to emulate, it is definitely The Dark Knight Rises towards the rest of it, because it's just to try and mimic and
Mhm,
mirror his struggle to
mhm.
become the greatest is just him climbing out of a well is I don't
I don't
know.
know.
It was
They
definitely, they tried to like fit it into a point where it's like, okay, we need to get Zoro off screen for an episode. It's like,
yeah,
okay, we'll just do that.
yeah, and just throw him down a well. Which, to be fair, in anime, he was just like because of Usopp's antics, he was stuck at the bottom of the slope anyways, and that's why he was absent for most of the arc. So they did this in a more like grounded way, which I think is fair. So there's that. Which we call it.
I don't know. If
Kuro.
there is something, yeah, if there is something for Kuro that I will admit is that Kuro was played extremely well in the live
He's
action,
really
and
good.
he was threatening. He
Yeah.
was, it's like the, at the very least, the atmosphere and the tone that we get for the first three episodes is very
Mhm,
an underlying sense of menace and suspense, where it's just kind of like,
mhm,
oh, this dude's just going to go off on
mhm,
somebody. But
mhm.
in this case, it's only up until then that even though he does a phenomenal job at selling the character, it's definitely the fight itself doesn't really live up to anything along those lines.
Yeah, because like you see like how quickly Kuro is moving like around in the shadows when he's like intimidating the rest of the Straw Hats. But like in fight, like Luffy's just like, "Oh, I can keep up pace with you. No problem." And I know that it's like hard to demonstrate that in live action. But like I think like Calidor's character, like the way they portrayed Calidor and Captain Kuro was good. It showed him a sense of like competency, methodicalness. There's a sense of like I care about precision, right? Which is fair. So yeah, I think like that was the good part of Syrup Village. I also like that they gave Zoro like they toned down Zoro's cowardice a little bit more. They made him a little bit more lippy, which is good. I think those are like the core traits of who he is. But like I
Zoro
feel
or Usopp?
Usopp.
Yeah.
So, but I think that Usopp's like whole shtick is like, I'm going to exist alongside the Straw Hat Pirates in spite of me being a coward and not being as strong, and I'm gonna like find a way to keep up with them, find a different way to keep up with them, and I think like that's the core struggle that Usopp gets.
Towards the rest. Although he does kind of just leave Kaya high and dry. I was kind of like concerned about that for a second because it's just in the live action, she does give him the Going Merry. She does give him the opportunity to
Yes.
go on his own and become a new man for himself. And she does give him a kiss, but
Mhm.
then they sail off. And I'm thinking back, and it's just, wait, fuck, Mary's dead.
Mary's dead, and she
Her
has
butler's
Kaya.
dead. Her family's dead. Sure,
Uh,
the black cat pirates aren't going to be harassing her anymore. But then it's
mhm.
like it's like, oh yeah, no, I'm just gonna recover from my poison, manage my family's
Estate.
charities and wealth and empire all by myself. I'm all good. You go have an adventure. It's like, wait, so I'm abandoning you the same way that my father abandoned me. It's like, oh, it's like poetry. It rhymes.
Yeah,
It's like, oh
yeah,
no, no,
exactly.
we don't want that.
So yeah, there's that part of that. And like in anime, you get the Pumpkin Trio, so the Usopp Pirates crew, and they are there to keep her company alongside Mary, but they just killed off Mary, so it's like she has nothing right now. I'm sure like as somebody with her wealth, she'll be fine. And she did state that she's gonna go off and study to become a doctor. So who knows? We'll see like whether or not that's gonna pay off in fruition like later down the line. Okay. Uh
Nah, there's only so much she can do, but hopefully they'll give us a because she did what is it? She did get a look at Luffy's poster, so at the very least, like she's doing at live at that point. But then yeah, no, it's definitely it was not necessarily my favorite. It was definitely something that I don't believe should have taken up a full 2 episodes to kind of like get all that point
it was
across because
slow.
they did try to cram as much as they could in there, like Zoro's backstory and like leading in towards the rest of it. But as something where it's like, oh man, we're gonna get 2 episodes focused on Usopp, that's not necessarily something I'm looking forward to. On the other
Mhm,
hand, though,
mhm.
2 episodes that they did end up giving to would have been towards Sanji, and this is
Yeah.
arguably my favorite 2 episodes of the show.
Yeah, the Baratie was good. I think like episode 5 was really, really strong because you get to see like because we have now a more established cast and you have more characters that you can play off of, it gives Sanji a lot of room to like show off his personality. So Sanji I characterize as being like smart, sly, cool, just very passionate. Like he gets like upset over small things like, whether or not you're gonna eat all the food that he prepared, like that's not to waste any of the food. I don't know, there are a lot of like good points of like Sanji's character where he's also like you also see like how he's like a very chivalrous kind of person where he like flirts with a lot of ladies, like he has that sort of like reverence around around them. And yeah, it's also like he's willing to immediately like banter with Zoro too, to like show off like, hey, I'm on par with you. So I don't know.
Yeah, I
Those
have
are
the suave, I have the wit. You definitely don't have any of those. The rest of it's like, yeah, I do have these swords though. It's like, yeah, cool. I have my legs.
yeah. Yeah. So it's good. Like he's that kind of character. It's like he's witty, he's got a quick mouth, and he's just cool. So that's fun. And I think Taz like does a great job portraying him. Yeah, really cool. Let's take a look. So Baratti's arc, we have
I mean,
so like
towards the rest of it, yeah, we do get the general introduction, like in towards the rest of it, and the reason why the crew has to stay around the Baratier, which is still a
Mhm,
like I did understand, like I did watch a couple of episodes of this for the anime to kind of like see what the comparisons were, but at the very
mhm,
least, I understand like what the Baratier could have been, but what it is for the time that they have, and as that being like a phenomenal set and a phenomenal like introduction to what Zeph has been able to build in this absence has definitely like been a phenomenal piece and a phenomenal restaurant that hell I would love to go to like towards the rest of it.
mhm.
Just sailing to just sailing through the sea and becoming that kind of a moving restaurant and what Zeph like was compared to how he is now.
Mhm. Yeah, it's his legacy as like Redfoot Zeph. So in anime, we see that Zeph is a renowned pirate and was formerly a renowned pirate with the Cook Pirates, and we got to hear that his reputation vouched for by Don Krieg, who's like the antagonist for that arc. In live action, it's replaced for Arlong for time reasons. So that makes sense, and I think that's passable. Don Krieg is otherwise a forgettable like villain in the grand scheme of One Piece, but I think like it really hurts Sanji's character because Gin's character is not present, and Gin's character really shows off like more of like what Sanji is about, where he has the willingness to feed anybody who's hungry, who comes through his restaurants, because he understands the struggle of what it feels like to be starving. In Sanji's backstory, Zeph chooses to save Sanji because they share a dream, and it's like it wasn't just like a happen thing, like where I did it on a whim. Like Sanji was starving for days, and Zeph.
Gave
So
him everything. Yeah.
yeah, so basically they're stuck on an island, they're shipwrecked. Zeph went to go save him, and like Zeph acts tough and like gives chooses to keep like a larger bag of supposed food for himself and only gives like a smaller bag to Sanji. But Sanji, after like 70 days or 80 days of like being stranded on this rock, finally decides like I don't have any other food, and he's reflecting on like why he wasted so much food. Like when he was on the ship, he goes off and opens up Zeph's like food bag, only to find out that's nothing but treasure. And like it emphasizes the importance of food is to people at sea. That is more valuable than gold. That like all of that gold and treasure is worthless when you're hungry. Gin plays off of Sanji's
Because yeah, did they ever like was the one man that
the one man that
Sanji
came
ended
back.
up
Yes. So
like
the one
feeding
that's
in
feeding,
the
that was
yeah?
Gin.
So did they actually name him Gin? It's like in live action.
It's
Oh, then
implied. It's implied
mm,
that it's Gin because of
mhm.
the way that he's dressed up, and he was part of the Don Krieg's crew, so that is Gin, so to speak.
Oh,
But
cool.
he has a much smaller role. In the live action, he simply just feeds. Sanji just simply whatchamacallit. Sanji says to Gin, like, I can understand how hungry a person feels more than anyone. You can die for your pride if you want, but if you eat and survive, don't you think there's a future for you? And it's more like, yeah, it's showing him like, to swallow your pride and like say like, this is necessary. You need this. So you know, live another day and figure it out from there. And it's like, yeah, it just delivers like more nuance to Sanji's character. And also like shows you like how passionate he is to stay at the restaurant in order to repay Zeph's pay back Zeph for what he's done for him. Because Zeph's given like a lot of things to Sanji. He's given him a place to express his culinary desire. He's trained Zeph to he's trained
Sanji.
Sanji to
Yeah.
fight and respect his hands. So that's why he only fights with kicks, because as not to damage his hands in order to remain a cook.
A chef's most important tool is his
Mhm.
hands.
It's his hands, yeah. So yeah, it's those things that like I wish were a little bit more emphasized in live action. We still get like some good character moments, but it doesn't hit as hard
Hmm.
because what should we call it? It's also like in defeating like Don Krieg at the end of it all. Sanji overhears like the rest of the kitchen crew joking about like how they're gonna act tough or shit talk him in order to get him to leave, so that he can finally pursue his dream of pursuing the All Blue with a Straw Hat crew. And like he overhears them like saying that, and he's like, "Oh wow, they really do care about me." And like when you see the confrontation where they're all like shit talking him to like get out of the Rati, like at the end, like they're holding back their tears because they really care about him, and they were just acting tough in order to like get him to go, and like it makes his cry out to Zeph like that much more meaningful, because like amongst all these like tough like rough and tough punk cooks cook pirates at sea who had to like fend off like occasional ruffians who stormed through their doors. They were they released all of their emotions in order to show Sanji like you matter to us. And I was like, oh, it's so good.
It is definitely unfortunate. Like in the interest of time, they had to just cut that down, where it's just
Hmm.
literally having only Gin being a side character for like 20 seconds, and then the majority of the relationship going with just Sanji and Zeph rather than Sanji and the restaurant as a
Hmm.
whole,
Yeah.
especially with the amount of different mechanisms and transformations that the Baradier has gone over in the
Yeah.
defense against pirates that would look to sack them and take all their food. It's like, no, fuck off. Every single chef inside of that restaurant is a hardened warrior, not only because they work in one of the considering the amount of kitchens that I've been through, like uh, towards a couple of the jobs that I've done, it's a battlefield in of its own. Like the chaos inside of a
Hmm.
kitchen it is one of the most controlled, chaotic environments that I've like ever been witness to, especially when it comes to the rush. And
Hmm.
so the fact that you would see the majority of these chefs not only consistently going through and being like one of the most proud restaurants inside of the East Blue, but the fact that not only do they have to do that, they also have to worry about protecting themselves against pirates that would come to sack their entire stock, which
Yeah.
would be almost like death to them. Where
Yeah.
it's just kind of like either losing your life or like what is it, losing a limb or losing your entire stock and inventory for meals over the next week. It's like
Hmm.
odds are they would literally just lose a limb.
Yeah.
It's just it is so like fucking stressful inside
Yeah.
of that kind of environment to the point where it has built those kinds of chefs and Sanji in of himself to make them warriors in their own right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's.
did. At least in the live action, I felt like in the interest of time, they did get the small, like the big enough points off
Hmm.
quick enough. It's just that definitely they didn't have enough time to marinate or have the opportunity to go through and like settle for enough time. Where it's just Sanji will feed anybody who is hungry who walks through
Hmm.
those doors,
Hmm.
regardless of who they are, if they paid. Regardless of that case, he's going to make food for them, and
Hmm.
food and respecting the food is like one of his utmost pieces and creeds that he follows by.
Yeah. It's
But
Zeph's top tenant, and it's also like why like Sanji cares so much about it now.
especially with what Zeph like sacrificed at those days all at sea, the fact that he would literally lose a limb to
Hmm.
feed himself and make sure that Sanji wouldn't have to like go another day being hungry. Where it's like, yeah, I could
Hmm.
hide this one can of tuna, but that
Hmm.
could be like a day or two for Sanji to keep living as a
Hmm.
kid to
Right.
continue his dream. And so it's like, I'm not even gonna fucking gamble that. I'm gonna give him every ounce of food
Hmm.
that I was able to recover through the wreck. And
Hmm.
as long as he survives, I will do whatever it takes on my own way to make sure
Hmm.
that he wouldn't have to, so that he could just suffer one day less of being
Yes.
hungry.
Yeah. So it just means so much more. It's also like the end of it. End of that, like when they're stranded. Zeph asks, proclaims to Sanji, like, it would be nice that at the end of all this, he'll retire from being a pirate because he ate his own leg, so he can't be a pirate anymore. And instead pursue his dream of like having a restaurant to feed anybody who's hungry at sea so that they would never have to go through what they went through. So and he passes off the torch to Sanji in order to inherit his dream of pursuing the All Blue in place of himself. And it's like, wow, this is like huge. His like most important treasure is like his goal to pursue the All Blue, and he's passing it off all to Sanji, entrusting it his will. And it's like, oh, so good. There are a lot of things to like about Barati. I think like there's like the fight with Zoro and Mihawk that eventually comes out, and the fact that like Mihawk only comes in by in the
In
anime
his
is to like, yeah, it's just to like finish off Don Krieg, like just in passing. He was just like, hey, I'm here to finish off the this big dude who's supposed to like be the strongest like pirate in the East Blue and like has an armada of like 50 ships and 1,000 like 1,000 men or something like that, only to be bested by like one man. And it's like, yo, there's always a bigger fish.
Yep, it's considering going through because you do get at least with Gen like that he will have the opportunity to go through and then give a little bit
Mhm.
of that motivation to Sanji, but the fact that you don't really feel like you would lose a lot with
Mhm. Yeah,
God
in
damn it, I'm
place
completely with
in
Don Krieg,
service of,
sorry.
so instead in place of Don Krieg, they up it for Arlong in order to like keep the pacing up.
Just
But
to
yeah.
keep going through the rest of that, yeah. But I will admit that Mihawk's introduction as where it's just kind of like, okay, well, the Warlords of the Sea, they're a thing. It's in passing in the live action, but you keep getting reminded of what these entities are
Mhm.
like going through the sea at the like under the thumb of the world government.
Mhm.
Because like holy shit, the fact that he's able to go through and not only cut cut bullets towards the rest of it or any kind of piece that comes his way. But the fact that Mihawk just like cut a
A
entire
ship.
naval vessel in half is just
Yeah.
absolutely insane. And giving that kind of like power, like just an instance of seeing the
Hmm.
power ceiling inside of this series is like, oh,
Hmm.
so we're going to be getting into that later
Hmm.
on. It's like, oh shit, we're
Yeah.
not even close because he fights Zoro with like a kitchen knife
Yeah. A little
for
fruit
the
knife
most
that he
part.
keeps on his collar simply for that. So yeah, I think so let's talk about the Zoro versus Mihawk fight. I feel in the live action. So in live action, Zoro requests the day after or the morning of at dawn with Mihawk, and Mihawk accepts because it's all like, yeah, sure, I've got time. Why not? Whereas in anime, it happens like as soon as like Don Krieg, as soon as like Mihawk finds Don Krieg. Sorry, when Mihawk finds Don Krieg, Zoro takes note of who this man is. Like, this is my goal. This is the person that I've been looking for. Zoro has like a huge amount of respect for Mihawk based on like his legend as
The
his
greatest
title as
swordsman.
the greatest swordsman, and it's more not necessarily like a duel to the death. Like Mihawk, he simply just wants to best him in single combat as a way to demonstrate that he is the strongest swordsman. Like it's more like about the art of swordsmanship rather than like I'm just gonna kill you and take your title. And I think that's like the nuance there.
But at the
Zoro.
very least, it's the
Mhm.
biggest, and then towards the rest of that, one of the biggest like departures from Zoro's character in the anime towards the live action is that he's still a hard ass, brooding, like
Mhm.
silent, witty kind of swordsman. So
Mhm.
at that point, he goes through about 4 to 5 different named attacks inside the anime, but then in the
Mhm.
live action, he's just silently and slowly like getting
Yeah.
bested by Mihawk at every single
Mhm.
confrontation and every single clash
Mhm.
to the point where it's just you even then at least in the live action you did get to see the gap in their strength, but then seems like it's a lot more prevalent in the animated version because they with the effects that they show with how disheartened that Zoro is going every single clash, every
Mhm.
single move, every single named attack that he gives him nothing but failure and dismay to the point where
Mhm.
oh shit, the gap is still this large.
Yeah.
And it's like nope, I'm totally where it's like god damn it. He's so disheartened by that point where it's like nope, I lost my second and third swords. I'm going to sheath my first one. There's absolutely no way
Yeah.
in that point. It's kind of like,
Mhm.
so are you done? It's like, no, well, a swordsman can't have any marks on
Scars
his
on his
back.
back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Scars on a swordsman's back are the greatest shame. And like in hearing that, Mihawk is like has his interest peaked where he's like, wow, that's admirable. This like in both of their minds, this is like how swordsmen should be. Like it's the honor and the code of a duel. Um, so I think in the phrasing in the anime, let's say Mihawk is like basically questioning and spurring on Zoro's ambition of becoming the strong swordsman. Like, what do you desire once you've obtained power? Um, and after defeating and sinking Zoro with his great sword Yoru, it's more like a sign of respect to you to Zoro and be like, if you are a true swordsman, like I understand that I'm not gonna hold back on you. So like after he defeats Zoro, he says, "So forge on ahead with that fierce conviction and try to surpass my sword." Mihawk genuinely encouraging Zoro to be like, you know what, you have potential, and I respect that. So keep going.
You will not die this day.
And then Zoro also like crying out at the end of that for failing to achieve his dream of becoming this world's strongest swordsman and defeating Mihawk, and also like failing maybe not obligation, but his goal to Luffy's
His
right hand man.
dream to Luffy, yeah.
Right. And he cries out in that, like he ugly cries because like he feels embarrassed that he can't like uphold those expectations. So he makes an oath to himself not to ever lose again. I don't know. It happens in the live action as well, but again, the delivery is just a little off. I think like in
Yeah.
Zoro's demeanor, he's in live action, he's just always super like stiff and always trying to like act tough and cool. Whereas in anime, you get more moments where Zoro's just able to be himself. He's goofy. He sometimes like cracks jokes and laughs along with Luffy. It's like when
The reoccurring joke that he has literally fucking no sense of direction only gets like a little bit like a comment inside of
yeah.
inside of what was it? the previous
Mhm.
towards Syrup Village, where it's just in that moment,
Mhm.
like in the animation, like dude doesn't know his his cardinals. It's like
Yeah.
forget about knowing north, south, east, and west. Dude doesn't know what left or right is,
Yeah.
and
It's
it's only
actually
like a passing mention, like
yeah.
towards the Syrup Village arc, where it's just kind of like he meets up with Luffy, and then it was just kind of like, "Yo, Zoro, how have you been?" It's like, "Climbed out of a well." It's like, "All right, you want to go beat at the Black Cats?" And it's like,
Uh-huh.
"Yeah, that's where I thought I was going. I thought the house was this way." It's like, "Nope."
So the I think the reference to that joke just comes from when he gets another sword in Logtown, where he gets a cursed sword, and after he gets that cursed sword, his sense of direction is like pretty off. And that's they make that a recurring joke like later from that point on in the series. But it's nice that they like make an homage to it here in the live action.
And
Um
yeah, but I do admit that what it did seem like, if there was ever a time for him to break down, lose the hard ass and like edgy demeanor towards the rest of it, then it would have been that moment with
yeah,
him just on the ground, ugly crying, proclaiming to the world, but mostly to Luffy, where it's
yeah,
like, I will forge onward and continue, and I will never lose again. And
yeah,
that would have seen, because he does shout it in the live action, but
yeah,
you still see his face
yeah,
incredibly tense. Like
yeah,
it's kind of like, yeah, he's holding back the tears and he's holding back the rest of it. But if there was ever a time for him to do that, it's like, no,
yeah,
this is going to be
yeah.
how you lose
Hmm.
for the first time in a long time,
Yeah.
because at the very least he will be trialed, he will be tested,
Hmm.
but for him to be beaten so outright, to not have anything to show for it, like this would have been him at his lowest point, and
Hmm.
he should have given him a little bit, like a little bit more of like an ugly cry to kind of like sell the rest of it, and to sell it to Luffy as well, like
Hmm.
to share Luffy's ridiculousness and just openness in that moment. So yeah, I definitely feel like even though he wasn't able to do a single like attack name, even though everybody else in the cast has been able to do that now, it
Hmm.
will hopefully in the second season, it'll come to a point where he will, and like for the first time in the live action, like say, like give an attack name to one of his slashes. And hopefully in that moment, I have an idea about which one he's going to use, but I just hope that in that moment he actually just
Hmm.
like gives up, becomes a part of the crew, and being like, all right, time for me to start naming my attacks now.
Yeah. Like, yeah, because like as as a character, like if you're gonna be fighting somebody, it's all about like a proclamation of like this is the style in which I want to proclaim to the world. This is like part of my identity and who I am. So I feel like it makes a lot of sense for Zoro to shout his attacks because he's doing it from like school of discipline as a swordsman. And like by and like also like to that effect, like Sanji also does that because like he's a proud chef and like this is just like it's basically like showing off to the world, "This is who I am. Watch me perform in my way and watch me kick your ass with it." And it's like, "Oh, that's, like, cool." I respect that. I think it would make more sense, but we'll see.
Yeah, because
Um
I do still think that even though the more notable arc is coming up, it's kind of like with the introduction of Sanji, getting the crew together, everybody still having that opportunity to stick around, become a crew, and like have that kind of like interpersonal chaos between the rest of it, and having Sanji like finally come on board, which I do admit did seem a little like it's like, oh yeah, no, we need, it's less like Sanji wanting to go out to sea and to find the blue
and the
for
Yellow Blue,
himself.
it's more like just because, like, they gotta go chase after Nami, which, like,
Yeah.
instigates, like, why they gotta go, right?
And we need a dude who can cook. So it's
Yeah,
just, and
need
then he like, and so the fact that he walks on board, it's cool that he's immediately bantering with Zoro. So it's like,
yeah,
okay, good. These guys have definitely got the repertoire down. But it's also
yeah.
kind of like, yeah, he does get a send off with Zeph and
Zeph,
the rest of the chefs, but like we've only seen one, or we've only like talked to one other chef besides Zeph inside of the restaurant. So it's kind of
yeah,
like seeing the rest of them behind Zeph
yeah,
as they say their farewells was, I still felt it because the relationship between Zeph and Sanji was built up enough
mhm,
to the point where you could still feel everything that Sanji was able to get from him and what he's leaving behind, but for the betterment of it, considering that it is something where it's just, I will go find the blue, I will go to the Brunswick, then why are you still working here? Why
yeah,
are you still staying here? It's just, then
mhm,
go.
yeah,
If this is what you want, follow your dream and go.
mhm. Yeah.
So it
It-
was, yeah, I did enjoy this arc of of the ones that we were able to go through the first season. This was probably my favorite.
yeah, I think it's probably the strongest. Episode 5, I think, is probably the stronger one. I think it just like it hits. It's just sh- short-lived because they have to keep the story moving and then just move on. So like it doesn't form like a nice, satisfying conclusion for Sanji's arc where he defeats a villain and is able to like move on from that and like join Luffy's crew without like any regrets. Whereas like now you still have like something bigger on the horizon that he's got to figure out. Um, and it isn't necessarily like, and also because they didn't have like a big antagonist to like overcome for Barati, like everybody else's character conclusions are still kind of left ambiguous. Like, you can kind of just say like, all right, guys, Arlong messed up our restaurant, and we're down a chef now, rather than be like, our ship is in tatters, but we'll rebuild it, and we'll still be the cook pirates, and we will still be serving out customers food. There's a different inflection to that.
Towards the rest of it, yeah, it's
Yeah.
there. It was still more than enough to like get it through. But then
Hmm.
even with the stuff that it was missing, it was able to go through and add enough to go through the rest of it. I mean, I did like that, especially like Sanji's character, like as a young kid.
Hmm.
Probably one of my favorite lines of that entire arc is like just fucking oreganos for savages. Like the first time he sees Zeph as he's going through to loot and plunder the ship, he goes through Sanji's kitchen, and he's only like what 12 at this point, and he sees the
Hmm.
pirate
Hmm.
with blood on his shoes strolling through the kitchen, and
Hmm.
he's not at all, not necessarily like scared, but he's not like angry
Hmm.
to until he walks up and it's like, this should have some oregano. It's like, I'm gonna fucking kill him. It's like
Yeah.
oregano's for savages. How dare this pirate? It's like he can kill everybody on board. If he touches my gratin, I am going to get a knife into his back. It's the last thing I do.
Yeah.
Uh,
Like.
I, I I did appreciate like that being their first like major interaction in the rest of
Mhm.
it. So it's just, and I do think that if one of the biggest lines that's going to stand out to me in this entire live action is definitely going to be oregano's for savages because I also despise it with a passion.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. They gave Sanji's backstory like maybe 2 or 3 minutes total. In anime, they give him like basically a full episode, like really like contemplate like what it feels like to starve and like all these sort of things and like coming to terms like Zeph's backstory. But for the sake of continuing the show, they gotta do what they gotta do. But it's
Mm.
good. I think it was all right.
Uh-huh.
So
Well,
like it moves us on over to Arlong Park. So let's see.
it
Uh,
was definitely something that was expected towards the rest of it. Like you knew, like at least in the live action, that Nami was going to be like moving forward and
mhm.
trying to get back to Arlong to try to figure out where they were
Right.
going and why she was
Yeah.
doing all of this in the first place.
It was
But
sprinkled into the previous arcs where she was just corresponding. Like we were foreshadowed that Nami was was an accomplice to another pirate gang or association. And this is just like the payoff to that. So it's fine.
it's like, yeah, at least leading into it, there wasn't as much towards the rest because at least we did get to see Arlong and what I think that was six,
Hmm.
leading on towards confrontation, leading towards like chasing after Nami, and
Hmm.
getting towards the rest of it and making it over to the Tangerine Farm and try to see like where Nami came from and what her entire set was because yeah,
Belmir.
because I mean she was a mom, that was for sure.
Yeah, so in live action, Belmir is like just like your middle-aged mom who's just like, yeah, man, I'm frugal and I'm a mom and I used to be a Marine. And those are like the three tenets where that she has going for her. In the anime manga, Belmir is just she's like she was like according to Gen, when Nami like runs away after their confrontation, Gen fills her in on like who her mom used to be, and her mom used to be like just a wild punk and hellraiser in the town until she went off to join the Marines and become a proper person. And
And then here
after,
she's
yeah,
mostly just in live action. It's like she is a random marine that was in the middle of a
mhm,
massacre, and she
battle,
decides to,
yeah,
and she just saves
too
Nami
good,
and her sister.
yeah. So like I think it robs like Belmir's character where Belmir puts it on herself to become a mother, to take on two refugees, two orphans of war, and like say like I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna do what I can in order to be a good mom or to provide for them. So like in anime, you get to see like a lot of the backstories of like how she raises them. Like Belmir runs a tangerine orchard or farm, and that's how they make their funds. But it's still not making ends meet. So she does a lot of things to sacrifice for her kids, her orphaned adopted kids. She skips out of meals, but she downplays it as her like just being on a diet. She upcycles like old hand-me-downs because they can't really afford new clothing or some things like that. So she hand sews new clothing for Nami from Nojiko's old set or old clothing. Um, and it's also reinforced that they're poor because like Nami feels compelled to steal because they don't have any money, and that's kind of the strains of like what it feels like to be a single mom. So like all of that like is compiled into showing you like the amount of effort that Belmir puts into her kids. Even when Arlong like raids the village, she's competent. Like we see that Belmir is like a punk, and she's just competent. She knows how to like handle a gun. She like straddles, she kicks down the door and like straddles Arlong and puts a gun to his face, and like it's like whatever. Like she knows that she's bested, but even so, like she tries to maintain her composure and tries to keep the whereabouts daughters at bay, as not to alert Arlong. Even like that whole scene with like Arlong noticing like three plates on the table. How many people are here? It's actually Gen who comes in to help out Belmir, where he's like, "Hey, Belmir, you remember that you invited me for dinner, right? Let's get to it. That food's gonna get cold." Whereas like in live action, it's just like, "Oh yeah, I actually do have two daughters. Let me just like state it out right now because I'm a mom and I'm refusing to hide that fact." And it's like, I don't know, man. There's
Yeah.
small parts of that arc that makes me feel it misses. I wish they would have just given it a little bit more time. I think it really needed it.
Yeah, the kind of like the half episode, like shave a half episode length of time off of Syrup and then give it to Kokoyashi and give it to Arlong Park, and it
Yeah,
would
yeah,
have
yeah.
just given that much more allocation of time and resources to kind of like go through. And
Dev.
so like it's yeah, there's not really much that you could do like in hindsight towards the rest of that, and there was only so much time that they could do. So they were hoping that with
Mhm,
that extent they would just give like 2 episode chunks.
mhm,
But yeah, I don't know. At that point, it doesn't necessarily have to be all uniform. It
mhm,
should be you should be given like specific pieces and specific moments, the
mhm,
time and the energy and the resources to like breathe in a way that will breathe new life into a different medium in this case, which
mhm,
I kind of didn't really feel for a lot of the big moments, because at least a lot of episode 7 like leading towards the rest of it, it's just you do get to see that, but then most of it is either focusing on, we do get to see Arlong bribing the Marines, and then we get to see Nezumi, and then seeing how that relationship goes and how Arlong is able to survive towards the rest of it. You don't like Arlong keeps talking about the distribution as well as the discrimination towards fish people, but it doesn't.
mhm.
He says it like once whenever he enters the Baratier, and then
Yeah.
as he goes to burn down Kokoyashi, he also like says it's
Mhm,
like, yeah, for too
mhm.
long the humans have gone through, and the rest of it's like, dude, you've enslaved these humans in this village for
Yeah,
like what, 8 years,
yeah,
and so you're just gonna go like and you're going to go through and burn them as an example. It's just kind of like I don't
yeah.
necessarily know too much. And then I did appreciate the man meets man, or man respects man version of Garp
Uh,
going over and like chatting with
mhm,
Zeph towards the rest, but how long they decided to stay there to figure out where essentially they all like
mhm,
Luffy and his crew went was kind of
mhm.
it was a little too much, as in like
Yeah,
it took away too much time for that
yeah,
episode.
too much screen, and it's also like, so that's like coming back to like, yeah, Krieg and Zeph having their conversation with each other, where it's in place of it's Garp and Zeph having the conversation about the old guard, and like just also vouching for Zeph's credibility as a pirate, like how competent he was as a pirate from Garp. Um, so I think it was okay for them to fit that in. But you're right. They spent a little bit too much time. They added in a small little scene with Kobe and Helmeppo like sharing about the exposition about like the Shishibukai and the warlords. So and also like what they're gonna do with Luffy. But I don't know. I don't know. It was tacked on, and I think that they just felt like they needed to do something with those characters because they're there and they gotta like eventually get their way to Kokiyashi Village and confront Luffy at the end.
I
Moving
mean,
on to
towards
this.
the rest of it, yeah,
Mhm,
because you do get at the end of the day like why Nami was doing the things that she was doing and how much she was saving and how much the majority of that goes, but it does feel like an emotional moment in the live action when Nezumi, who not only has been taking bribes from Arlong, goes
mhm.
through, but also takes a tip
Steals.
where it's like, ooh, it's like I know where you could find 100 million berry just on the down low, and
Mhm,
it's I don't know how exactly they knew where to find, but I guess it was near Kokiyashi village, so that's also kind of fine. And the moment itself, as Nami loses everything, is good and played out, but one of the only moments that I knew that was going to happen leading in before the live action came out, where it's like one of the I only know like a handful of One Piece moments, but they are
mhm,
those that have been replayed so often that even if you haven't seen the show, you know specific story beats that have impact and ones that are remembered towards the rest of it.
mhm,
And Luffy's declaration is definitely one of those towards the rest of it,
mhm,
where Nami is just over it. She's trying to stab Arlong's tattoo away from her arm, and finally she has the confrontation saying that even though Luffy doesn't have the full extent of what's going on, all he sees is one of his friends just at the end of their rope and in trouble, and he wants to help them in any way that they can. So he
mhm,
gives her his hat and then makes the declaration that of course he's going to help her. But in the live action, he gives her the hat and then slowly places it on her head and then starts what sounds like muttering to himself, of
mhm,
course I will, of course I will, of course I will, kind of like
mhm.
a the little
Yeah,
engine that could.
yeah.
I think I can, I think I can, I
Like
think I can.
like, just trying to rev him up in order to, like, finally say, like, "I can confront, Arlong." Whereas, like, in anime, the intention behind Luffy is, like, "I'm doing it because I just see one of my friends are hurt, and that's it. That's all the motivation I need, to, like, just do this. I'm gonna walk in there, I'm gonna ask, 'Who's Arlong?' and just punch the first person that I see." That's his motivation, whereas, like, here, because Luffy was present for the backstory explanation from Nojiko,
And
it
he's
changes his
already
intent.
quote unquote fought
He
Arlong
knows.
once. Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, he knows, like, when Luffy has, like, "Why are you here?" "I don't know," or, like, I don't know. He knows why
So
he's
it's
there.
Yeah, it seems like it's not that he's not only helping a friend in need, but he also has to like rev himself up to the point where it's like, all right, this dude kicked my ass once. I'm gonna have to like make sure that I know that I can beat him
Mhm,
towards the rest of it. But the way that he says it multiple times kind of like takes away the effectiveness of him just saying it once,
mhm,
where it's just she asks him for help, he puts his hat on her head, and then he walks away, and then he leans down, takes in some air and then declares it to the world and
yeah,
then
mhm.
immediately like grabs his crew and starts strutting towards Arlong Park. And
"Let's
so
go!"
that
Right!
yeah. And so the
Uh
fact that and
mhm,
so like how episode 7 ends where it's just yeah, he gives his declaration, he sees his crew, let's go.
boom,
Oh fuck, they
boom,
burned Cocoa
boom, boom,
Village.
boom,
And
boom.
and like and so it's on fire and it's like,
Yeah,
"Oh, so now we have to go take the energy that we had revving ourselves up to go and like wreck shit in Arlong Park.
mhm,
Now we have to point it in another direction and have it simmer and settle to
mhm,
go through the remnants of Cocoa Village
mhm,
and then take that energy to go
yeah,
over and like to go wreck shit there. It kind of
yeah,
did take a bit of the moment away from me where it's just you had that energy and then you had to dilute it and then try
yeah,
to redirect it again as to where you
yeah.
were supposed to go in the first
Yeah.
place.
Like, I don't know, like the whole overtaken scene where like his whole like his famous like bum 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 scene or theme in the background and like he's just assembling his crew and be like, yo, we know what we know what we're here to do. We're here to follow our leader. Yeah, so that's I'm glad that they include like the iconography from it, but I don't know, down a little watered down. And also happened at night instead of like just during like broad daylight. So it's like so dark. Uh, and it's like more difficult to see like what these characters are doing.
I know it's like they're using the darkness to emulate the tragedy of Cocoa Village being burned down more, but
Hmm.
it's just that's not. I'm pretty sure. Like, does it get sacked or trashed in the anime version? Because otherwise,
Uh, it's basically it's pretty run down, or just over the years of like being in Arlong's territory. So like that's
so yeah,
why it's happening. But they're not exactly like sacking the village. That's already happened. It's more like Arlong is just chilling out in his park, like laughing about like what's going on. That's it. That's all it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, it just didn't really seem like a necessary thing to like burn Coco again. Like Coco was already run down by the time the crew even got there. But then it's like,
yeah,
we're gonna
do
burn
it
these
again.
tinders again. Like, dude, one of the houses in the village was already flipped upside down the
Hmm.
first time that Arlong came there, like
And it's
8
still
years
there,
ago.
and it's
Like,
still there.
it's still upside down. It's just like, dude, you already wrecked the place. Like, you don't need to go do it
Wreck
to
it
him
again.
again. So it's just, yeah,
Um,
that does take away from the stride and from the walking up moment. Yeah,
mhm,
it didn't seem like the episode of that inside the anime where it's just like Nami gets all of her stuff stolen, and then because the village wants to go behind and
mhm,
rally behind her, where it's like we'd rather be dead than
mhm,
serve the fishman, and so they all go off to essentially
mhm.
like get slaughtered.
Right.
And that's when Nami breaks down, and that's when
Mhm,
she is finally
mhm.
asking Luffy for help.
Right.
And then Luffy and his crew, like basically after the declaration, like in broad daylight, light a cigarette and start strutting towards Arlong Park to like get shit done. Like that,
Yeah.
like those beats like all in a row would have just been a phenomenal piece. But then the fact
Mhm.
that it's kind of like all slipshod and all over the place,
Yeah.
like in the live action, was just kind of like, man, this
Yeah.
could have been better.
That's what I'm finding about like a lot of like live action where the series of events are unfolded in different sequences and it just changes the connotation of like how we interpret the scenes. I think like one good note of this that's in this episode is like Nojiko revealing the backstory of Nami to the Straw Hats, where in anime, Nojiko knows why Nami is working with the Arlong pirates because she has a goal to like buy out the village. Like if I could solve this issue with enough money, then it's fine. I can endure it all by myself. And like Nojiko, so like she asked Nojiko to keep it a secret from the villagers as not to make them worry to like go after her because she doesn't want anybody to get hurt for pursuing her and trying to help her. And that's why she's always like so individualistic and like avoidant for receiving help. She just wants to keep everybody safe. So that like it also like hits home like why like her asking for help is such a more big deal when she makes that proclamation. Nojiko, let's also like it changes the relationship between Nojiko and Nami where because Nojiko knows about why the intentions why uh Nami's doing all this, it makes her likable and makes her have like a nuanced like perspective like how Nojiko's associations with Nami, where Nami's like not just like a villain to like the villagers. It's more like all the villagers already know, and but they're strained because like they see her being put in a position where she has to help the Arlong pirates. Nojiko's also like sometimes like the shoulder to lean upon to Nami, and like here in live action, she's just like outright like unlikable or like she just like hates Nami, and that removes a lot of like the worth and value of the relation. So I don't know. It just turns Nojiko into like, hi, I'm just a sister. From like, I'm I'm a competent and caring sister, and I understand the struggles that you're going through. To a sister who's like, let me spit at you because I hate you. You only get that revelation after when she's digging up her funds from Belmir's grave. It's like, like I don't know, man. They did Nojiko so dirty for that. Even Gen, because Gen is like kind of like a father figure to Nami, where Gen looked after. So like Gen provided the backstory for Nami's for Belmir to Nami, and like understands like why it hits home for like why Belmir cares so much about Nami, and Nami like recognizing that. It's like small things like that.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like there was just a bit that was left on the cutting room floor that it didn't necessarily use to the best degree, and they were trying to fill out a lot of stuff in between to see what they could add towards the rest of it, but it's didn't necessarily seem like they succeeded in that, and that's one of the reasons why it kind of just falls flat on me because I've heard of all these moments, but seeing that they weren't added upon or expanded just didn't necessarily like give the show a proper way to make us care about these grand declarations that were going towards the rest of it. And then once the conflict actually happens and we get the action and we get the beats that happen towards the rest of the story, there's even stuff missing from there too,
Yeah,
considering that they've just finally ran out of time and
yeah.
they need to get through all Long Park towards the rest of it. That
Mhm.
they will have to get rid of some characters. They will have to go through the rest of it, and some of them will just have to make do with what they've been given and try to like figure out the rest of it. Because we do get
Krobi?
yes, because we do get Kurobi, but we don't get Hachi.
Yeah.
And so that just doesn't that kind of like takes Zoro's involvement away from the rest of the fight, but at the very least, Sanji still gets to fight him, but not into a degree as much as he was able to inside the anime.
Yeah. And like also like a large majority of the episode for episode 8 was for Garp coming to Kokoyashi Village to like clean up the crew, to clean up the straggler Arlong pirates and like Nezumi as well. So I don't know. I think like a good note was like how Luffy uncovers like to tie up that plot line between Kobe and Luffy is like finally they get to reunite and meet, and Kobe is the one to reveal to Luffy his dream of becoming a wanted man and giving him the poster of his bounty. And I was like, yeah, this is cool. Then
Yeah,
you get
instead
like,
of Nezumi being the one to, out of spite, like say, "Hey, I hate these guys,"
mhm,
Luffy needs to be like put on a wanted poster towards the rest of it. But the fact that
mhm,
they, what is it, Garp was able to be there to witness the moment of Luffy becoming a wanted man, and then
mhm,
having and having Kobe be the one to like
mhm,
give Luffy, it's like, "Hey, this is what you wanted. You're a wanted man. You now have a bounty." So
mhm.
now there will be people chasing you through the rest of the world. And it's like, yeah, but it's going to be more fun that way. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's fucking cool.
Yeah, I think that's true to the characters and like what they want. And yeah. And like also like them for them to borrow off of that whole character development from Water 7 when like they so a lot of episodes 6 to 8 borrows a lot of elements of Water 7 where Nami is like questioning Luffy of what he's going to do as a captain. Like, what are you going to do? You have to make the hard choices. And that only really comes into revelation in Water 7 arc, a much later arc in One Piece when the crew is falling apart and Luffy doesn't know like what direction he wants to take the crew. So they're lifting a lot of that. It's also like the arc where Garp and Kobe are get reintroduced to the series. So that's where they're drawing a lot of the inspiration from. And I don't know if it was like necessary here, but they added it in because they could, and it's material that fits within Garp and Kobe and Helmeppo as well. So I don't know. It was creative liberty in order to keep pacing up. So I'm curious to see like what they're gonna do for the following season. Or sorry, before we get even to that, we'll talk about like the final fight with Arlong.
Yeah, because it's just there were portions I think that were amplified because of the live action, but then the more and more I looked at it, there were a handful of other things that didn't necessarily like add or live up to any of the expectation. Because I mean, at the very least, Usopp's fight towards the rest of it didn't really like got just enough screen time for him to be on his own to be able to have the opportunity to fight and like use his wits and give himself the opportunity to go through in a fight and still have that being something where it's like, oh yeah, dude, I totally kicked that guy's ass like back in the forest, and it's just kind of like, yeah, off screen, nobody else was here, and it's like, yeah,
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 yeah.
it's like, and the great Captain Usopp is able to fell his
Oh,
opponent
yet
in
again.
front of nobody.
Yeah,
It's like, oh boy.
yeah. The fight with Chu is fun. I like that they gave Usopp like his own moments to fight in his own way. Those are good. Zoro also doesn't really have much to work with here in this arc because Hachin
Y-
isn't there.
Yeah, he doesn't have his entourage. He doesn't have his two boys, his
Yeah,
brothers.
yeah.
And so he doesn't have the opportunity to use his three swords again. It's only
Hmm.
just him and his one like going around and trying to do as much as he can in the injured state because
Hmm.
he is also injured in the anime, but
Yeah,
he's like on his last legs and my dude is still like hemorrhaging blood. Like even
yeah.
Arlong to that
Arlong
point,
picks him
like
up and he's like, "Yo, how are you alive?"
how is this man even alive?
Yeah. So.
But there's only so much that they can do, and so they have to basically two-man Kurobi towards the rest of it, and that fight like
Mhm.
only goes about 2 minutes or so.
Yeah.
And it was probably one of the more awkward fights that I'd seen, or the awkward conclusion of the fights, because it starts off well enough with Kurobi like doing his best and having a much more adaptable fighting style near the water and giving him the force necessary to do a 2-on-1.
Hmm.
And then it's that standard of like nobody talks shits about Nami. It's like, okay, yeah, here you go. Now you pissed off. It's like, okay, fine. But the way in the live action that Sanji's kicks are kind of like resets, and
Hmm.
it's not it is such an awkward cutting between the rest of it where it's like he does get all of his or most of his kicks off, but it's kind of like he goes to the spinning kick and he hits him in the ribs, and then it resets him back to point one where it's like he hasn't even landed a kick yet. He's still
Mhm,
standing at motion,
mhm,
so it's kind of like kicks him in the ribs, reset. Now I'm going to
mhm.
kick him in the shoulder, reset.
Reset.
And the only two other kicks that goes through gets is that he actually no. So the he gives a kick to the ribs and then resets to the shoulder, and at the very least from the shoulder, he's still connected to him and gives him a chest kick, and so that goes through. But everything is just slipshottingly thrown together to try to emulate the final like beatdown that he is
Mm,
able to give Kurobi towards the rest of
yeah,
it. Because in the live action, he still does give a Muton shot,
yeah,
but it's like the stunt dude is on
mhm,
he's so obviously on a wire and
yeah,
like taken back, and he gets kicked up against a straw wall and he's down for the count, and it's just that's
mhm,
not really anything towards the rest of it. Whereas I hadn't revisited because I knew from somewhere that I had seen the end of Sanji's fight versus Kurobi as like a random clip on YouTube, like in the early 2010s. Like it was there, but seeing it now and the absolute beatdown that he beats the brakes off of Kurobi for like a
mhm,
minute straight, and it's some of the most brutal set of kicks that he's able to do. Like the fact that his instead of his neck kick being like a slow soft lead in and tap, and uh, the actor for Kurobi really has to sell it. Like he has to bend his neck to like give the image of there being force behind that kick.
yeah,
And of course, there's only so much you can do inside of those kinds of fights in with live action without having to rely on special effects. But
mhm,
then the fact that like how impactful every single one of Sanji's kicks seems
mhm,
in the animated version are just leagues above with the impact that is given inside the live action, and it just
yeah,
doesn't really sell that kind of dynamic motion and mysticism of that movement to the
mhm,
point where if I wanted to do something different because the how he's able to like knock him out of commission, it's just kind of like, yeah, sure, he kicks him like 4 to 5 times, but then his shot shoots Kurobi through Arlong's palace and through the wall, and it's
yeah,
like, oh yeah, no,
yeah,
that dude's not gonna move for like a month.
yeah. It really
Whereas
like
in yeah,
like in live action, it's like hard to pull off those feats just for like like for set restrictions, but like yeah, like just in anime, you see like the force that Sanji's kicks are able to like emit. Like he's able to like just break rocks, concrete, anything. Like his legs can like do it all. And it's really just like show you like this is the Straw Hat Crew. These are the monsters that they're dealing with.
and it
Yeah.
just doesn't necessarily because I could have like seen them do a similar vein because it's like, oh, they have to kick Kurobi against the wall. It's like
Hmm.
sure, but
Yeah.
you could have also it would have made for like a funny bit because
Hmm.
as Luffy is able to go and he is confronting Arlong with Nami in the room, and so they're able to go through and have those moments where Luffy finally gets the context of what Nami was going through and the kind of isolation and pain that she had to endure drawing all of Arlong's maps and
Hmm.
trying to get as much of the East Blue drawn so that when Arlong was good and ready, he would try to conquer
Hmm.
it with as many fishmen as he possibly could muster.
Hmm.
And so, like he Luffy saw the chains, he saw the rest of it. What Arlong is able to show off his sharp tooth sword, and
Hmm.
Luffy is able to in in a still really good vein. Like that was
Hmm.
one of the better moments I thought in that episode, where it's like, oh
Hmm.
yeah, no, I'm gonna threaten Luffy because he's still not
Hmm.
anything remotely close to being able to topple my empire. And Luffy, like for the first time, shows his anger and shows how much of
Hmm.
a threat he is by, like as he does in the show, breaking the sword with his bare hands
Hmm. Yeah.
and going through and having the opportunity to miss that. And as he's fighting Arlong and he's still not able to, fight Arlong up to the best of his ability, it would
Hmm.
have been a perfect moment for where it's kind of like Luffy is losing confidence and he's losing like ground against Arlong, but then
Hmm.
Kurobi flies through the background, like through the wall and
Yeah. Yeah.
through the building, and then Luffy's like, "Oh shit, my crew's also holding their own outside. Ah shit, I can't like let
Yeah.
myself get outdone by them. This would be a perfect time for me to,
Yeah.
crank it up a gear." But then, yeah, it's also one of the things that doesn't happen inside of any of Luffy's fights with Arlong. He doesn't bite him at
Yeah,
all.
yeah.
Like Arlong, the Shark
The
Man,
shark, the
does
saw.
not bite anybody inside of the
Yeah.
crew. Like he threatens to
Mhm,
bite Luffy in the neck in like
mhm.
episode 6 when yeah, before Nami intervenes. But outside of it, like Arlong does not get a single bite in on Luffy, period. And that was a little disappointing.
Yeah. I don't know, like, this I don't know. Like, yeah, like, the whole idea of, like, these are how the characters fight as a ways to, like, showcase their identity, I think is important. So, like, having those named attacks, showing the quirks of, like, how, like, characters fight is, like, important. So, I would have liked to see, like, Arlong to do more shark-related sort of combat or, like, something to that effect, right? They showed the scene of him, like, regrowing his teeth, which is fine. It's an allusion to, like, actually, like, what happened where, like, gets punched in the face, has his teeth broken, then only for like more teeth to come out, and like on to layer on top of that, he takes out his teeth like dentures, and uses them as weapons because of how sharp they are. So there's part of that, and I know that like for time constraints, it's like hard to pull that off. I think like the impact of the final kick was good. It was okay.
Yeah,
Um,
that was probably the like one of the better sets because they were on a at least in the anime they were a couple stories up inside the navigation in the map room.
mhm,
And so that would have given like a bit more of a set, but there was still enough sub basement to still give Luffy's battle axe
mhm,
that impact where it's like not only is it going to be breaking through the foundation of Arlong's entire
mhm,
uh of his entire palace, but he's
mhm.
also going to have that impact so in such a great amount of force that it's going to drive him through the floor
Yeah,
and
through the
everything and it
floors,
yeah,
plural.
exactly. All of his and then all of his dreams, all of his because I think that's something I did like inside the live action where it's just kind of like, yeah, Luffy you think that because he did have a couple of arms up on Arlong in parts of his fights inside of the anime, but
Mhm,
you never really feel that inside of the live action. But at the
mhm,
very least, if you like Luffy outside of his battle axe was
mhm.
being outfought and like out brutalized, but
Yeah.
he does look around and in that same vein where it's like, I can't beat you, but I can beat down everything you've built. And so he
Mhm.
starts to punch the walls and destroy the
Yeah,
foundation and kind of like break towards the rest of it so that
yeah.
when he finally lands
Mhm,
that final decisive blow with his
mhm,
battle axe,
mhm.
everything crumbles down and everything just falls apart. He has broken Arlong not only physically and mentally, but he's also beaten him to the point where his empire is will no longer be able to recover.
Mhm.
And so having that moment and standing atop the rubble of what was or what used to be his palace was definitely like that was still a moment that rang true in the live action as much as it did in the anime.
Mhm. I wonder if like whether or not that impact could have been felt like in different ways, where they could have used like different panning shots or like ways to like convey like, yeah, this is the strength and the feats that Luffy was willing to go to in order to like free Nami from her shackles and the things that tethered her to this village. So yeah, they did that off, and it's also like the citizens of Kokiyashi Village weren't there to witness Arlong's defeat, so it makes the win like maybe not less triumphant, but it's a little bit different. It would have been kind of cool to be like when he's making that loud proclamation, like "You're my friend, you're my crew," to everybody else to
And
let it be known like this is this is who Nami is, and this is how much we care about her, and let's
and
let's celebrate.
and everybody's glad that it and they're glad to see somebody other than them
Hmm.
care about Nami to such a
Yeah,
degree to like
yeah,
make her a part of that crew and to actually be a part of a pirate set that actually treats her like a person and is as important as everybody thinks they are.
hmm,
So yeah, it's been really but then leading towards the rest of it, it's like kind of the same deal at the end of Syrup, where it's like the residents of Cocoa Village, A, don't get to see any of what happens in Arlong Park, and then
hmm,
B, it's like, yo, your village has been entirely burnt down,
hmm.
and
Yes.
you're holding a party in the ruins of your it's like I don't know towards the rest of it. At
Yeah.
the very least, in the anime, when Nezumi gets beaten up and taken out, it's like Nami makes it a point to say every single bit of that 100 million berry
Hmm.
is going to go towards Coco
Hmm.
and for their rebuild and for
Hmm.
their prosperity and for their sake, and you're not going to touch a single cent. And it's like,
Hmm.
okay, understandable, have a nice day.
Yeah.
Whereas all the Marines leave
Hmm.
and they knock out Nezumi as he gets dragged away by the Marines, but
Yeah.
we don't really get the guarantee that like where did that 100 million berry
What are the
go?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, what are
Like
them
like what happened? Instead, we have to fight Garp,
yeah,
and like that's about it.
yeah. So, I don't know, it's a little bit odd. It just dampens some of, like, the core values of the characters. Like, Nami's all about money and, like, why she, like, has such a high, pedestal on it and, like, what it can do. It's for those reasons and, like, why she's also, like, so inclined for, like, thievery and all these sort of things. It all just plays back to, like, why she does it. So, yeah, I don't know. It kinda dilutes a lot of, like, character motivations,
Yeah,
but otherwise,
it's
it's
it
okay.
is diluted towards the show because at the end of the day, yeah, like for One Piece, yes, the live action was a little bit of a diluted version because of the amount of time they had left and because of the amount of things that they had to fill towards the rest of that. At the end of the day, it's still the best live action like TV adaptation that we've gotten for an anime period. Like that goes without saying.
Although all in all, it was good. It was still the best adaptation that we got thus far. I'm hoping that, when they do the Alabasta Saga, that, they spend a little bit more time, like, fleshing out the individual islands, because I think that's, like, really when the Straw Hats form themselves as a crew, getting themselves up into all sorts of shenanigans, and then you also get to see, like, new dynamics play out across the different Straw Hat characters, like, how Sanji and Nami interact, how Sanji and Zoro interact, Usopp, and eventually even Chopper. Like, I'm excited to see like how they're gonna pull this off, and I hope that they learn more about from this season and implement it into the next. So who knows? I'm okay to wait for another 2 years, 3 years, whenever the it's gonna go back into production.
Because I do trust with what they've been able to do and accomplish, like within this adaptation. I mean, to be fair, production. I think it was Tomorrow Production.
Tomorrow Productions or Tomorrow Studios.
Tomorrow Studios, yeah. So it's like, yeah, at this point in time, like Tomorrow Studios was definitely like a little bit a concerning point, especially leading into this adaptation with everything that went wrong with
In Cowboy Bebop.
Cowboy Bebop. But to
Yeah.
be fair, if there was one thing that I could give the majority of their like cast and crew, it was that the actors that they hired were like really good fits for people in the live action adaptation of Cowboy Bebop, and
Mhm.
the set design like still was great to the point where
Mhm.
they did make you feel like you were inside of those worlds.
Mhm.
Too bad the
It's
script
also
was just so far
yeah.
below anything that we would have expected.
Yeah, yeah. So, that's what it is. Like, I can see the care that they put into the sets and, like, also, like, why they structured the story as they did for the One Piece adaptation. They have a lot of references to, like, small character moments, like, they include, like, a lot of, like, homages and, like, Easter eggs for fans of the series, and it's like so if they know about it, then they're clearly, like, doing the research. They don't have to include all these small little points, but they're doing it just for fun. They included like small shots of like Panda Man in there, which is like an ongoing like gag character that Oda includes in some of his panels just to see like if you can find him, he's everywhere. He's like in a whole bunch of spots. And they include that in the live action adaptation. It's also like references to later arcs in the series, like Gallery Law, the Shipwright Company from Water Seven, also shows off on like some crates when they're in a marine base, like small things like that. It's nice to show that they care about it. Even like in small characters that aren't necessarily named in the live action, we know who those characters are. Like at Brati, there's Captain Fullbody, or like yeah, which is so Captain Fullbody is like the guy who's picking a fight with the pirate at the table. And he's actually like a more important character for Sanji because it shows like this is what full body is taking somebody out on a date and it's trying to impress his date with his wine knowledge, but like Sanji goes in and like corrects him like no, that's not even close. It like shows a lot of like things things about him. It's like Sanji's witty, he's knowledgeable about cooking. He's also really strong because full body was what you call it was the one who originally fired the cannonball against the Straw Hats, but Luffy deflected it and it hit the Barati, which is why Luffy was at the Barati working doing dishes originally. So just small things like that. They like and they make sure that the costume characters were there just so like hey, like if you know, you know.
Exactly.
Um,
It's one of those things where you don't have to. They're not blatantly spouting out where it's like, oh, this is Captain Fullbody of the Marines who was able to go through and he's been like on their crew and trying to like go through. Like they're not because they
mhm,
don't have the time to reintroduce all of these named characters in the anime.
right,
But
right.
at the very least, they can set you up if you see their design and you see their attitude and the way that they carry themselves, and it's like, oh, phenomenal. I know
Mhm,
exactly who you are, and you haven't said a single word. And
mhm,
so it's been phenomenal, at least, especially with the production crew, to like give those designs that kind of style and flourish and recognizability
mhm,
towards the rest of it. And yeah, it's just a lot of people around this. Like between the showrunners like Stephen Maeda and Matt Owens, like they did a phenomenal job on top of the writing crew, on top of the people that they were able to go through and direct what they needed to do and accomplish for
mhm.
a story of this caliber. And so the fact that at the end of the day, I still think that they were able to succeed in more ways than one. And that is definitely a surprising bit and
Mhm.
something that is very rare nowadays, and hopefully it will lead the charge for like more adaptations like this in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. They now hold the crown for best anime adaptation, live action anime adaptation to date. Although like the bar was relatively low to begin with.
That's the problem. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
congratulations, you raised your knee and took a step over. But the fact that you were able to like go through, it's like, no, I'm not going to just walk over this bar. I'm going to build and set a
Mhm,
new one that
mhm,
has to be recognized and like taken into note whenever anybody else is going to even attempt to adapt these kinds of stories.
mhm. Who knows? We'll see what the next arcs are going to be like, and hope that whatever Tomorrow Productions or whatever the state of live action anime adaptations comes, that it's going to be for the best.
We're definitely like on a better path for sure. Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to. Yeah, at that point in time, hopefully they get enough seasons in that they reach the grand line by the time that the characters themselves are able to go through, and so the time skip actually feels uh
Like a sizable
natural. Yeah.
yeah, you actually like have the gang that come back together and like you get to see like, oh, this is the new crew, this is what I've been up to.
The fact that we have the opportunity and that they might it could be successful enough that you would actually be able to get to that point in the story would be it would be crazy. The fact
They're
that
they're
you're
asking
actually yeah.
they're asking for 12 seasons though. So like how feasible is that for them to do that?
Yeah, like they're asking for 12 seasons, and then I would
It's like
imagine Netflix is going to be like,
I don't
okay,
know, man.
we need you to see. Well, then, if you're asking for 12 seasons, we need 12 successful seasons. We're not going to be dumb like Rick and Morty, and it's like we're going to immediately
Mhm.
like sign down on. We will give you whatever production you need for 10 seasons, and it's like no, 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 no. They need results, and thankfully,
Yeah.
I do think first season was enough to instill confidence into any of the producers that are going to be like moving forward and looking towards it, but it is going to be tough leading in and having more and more success afterwards to the rest of it. But I do think that everybody a part of this cast and crew, I think they're up for it.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. At least we'll see how long the production is because this is long spanning series and like there's just so much to adapt. Like I don't know how they're gonna do it. We'll also see like maybe in the next like 5 years when Oda finally finishes his last arc of One Piece and we'll finally get like a live action and anime adaptation conclusion. So we'll see.
Only time will tell. You can never you can never like pin it down with Oda in these things, especially with when and if he will ever be able to go through and get it done. But to be fair, he's been with the story longer than any of us ever have. So if he's going to be able to go through and sign off and give his blessings towards the rest of this, I think we can go through and be confident enough that we'll be able to have more opportunities and more good adaptations following it and yet to come.
So I think that's it. One Piece, the live action adaptation, has set sail, and they're headed off to the Grand Line. And to make an adaptation that will set the precedence for all future adaptations.